In this video we're going to continue our work on adding and subtracting fractions. So let's look at our learning objectives for today. We're going to start by recalling the basic rules for adding and subtracting fractions. Then we're going to hopefully be able to demonstrate how to add and subtract the most complicated fractions when the denominators are different and we can't use equivalent fractions like we did before half term. And then some of you might at the end of the lesson be able to predict how we might move on from this and look at multiplying and dividing fractions, and I'll give you a little bit of a clue. It's a lot easier than adding and subtracting fractions is. Okay, so let's start with just reminding ourselves what we've already done. So we started with the most basic, adding and subtracting fractions. So just for a very brief second, I'm going to ask you to pause the video and just tell me the rule for adding and subtracting fractions. So pause the video and tell me the rule. Okay, so did you remember that the denominator stays the same? We only add the numerator and not the denominator. I hope you did. So I'm just going to remind you very quickly, recap these two examples on the screen. I have 2/7 plus 3/7. I think I talked about elephants. I think I've talked about handbags. Doesn't matter what you think of, just don't think of that seventh as a number. Think of it as a thing, a part of a whole. So if I have 2 of them and then I add 3 of them, that means altogether I have 5 of them. And what were they? They were sevenths. So I have 5/7. 2/7 plus 3/7 is 5/7. Done. Subtraction is exactly the same. 9/12 take away 5/12. Think of it as a thing rather than a 12th. Think of it as a part of a whole. So I have 9 of them. And then I take away 5. How many does that leave me? 9 take away 5 is 4. What were they? They were 12ths. Now, those of you who are looking to extend your ability here might be able to see that 4/12 and think about simplifying. Now, we haven't really looked at this when we've been adding and subtracting fractions, but we have done simplifying fractions. So remember, to simplify a fraction, I have to do something to the top and the bottom. I have to multiply or divide the top and the bottom. So 4 and 12, I know I can halve both of those. I can divide them both by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. So I can simplify that fraction to 2/6, but I can do it again because I can divide 2 and 6 both by 2 again. So divide by 2. 2 divided by 2 is 1. And 6 divided by 2 is 3. So I can say that 9/12 take away 5/12 is 4/12, but it's also 2/6, and that's also 1/3, because they are all equivalent fractions. So those of you who found these red questions quite easy might want to start looking, can I simplify? On the question above that, 5/7, I can't simplify that. That's my final answer. So it's not always possible, but it is something we want to be looking at. So just keep your eye out when we're doing the easier questions. Can I simplify that answer? So today we're going to look at some of the more complicated questions with adding and subtracting fractions. So last lesson we looked at whether I change one of the fractions using equivalent fractions to make them have the same denominators. What we're going to look at today is when I have to change both fractions, and we're going to look at some nice tricks to use. So, my first example is 5/6 take away 2/5. That's my first example for today. So my denominators are 6 and 5. So, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my denominators so they both have the same. To do this, I'm going to multiply the first denominator, which is 6, by the second denominator. So I'm going to times 6 by 5, because that's the second denominator. And if you remember, the rule for fractions is whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. So I'm going to times the top by 5 as well. Bit of maths now in my head. 5 times 5 is 25, and 6 times 5 is 30. Then I'm going to go to my second fraction and I'm going to do the same, but this time I'm going to multiply by the other denominator. So this time I'm going to do 5 times 6 because that's this number over here. And then because I've done that to the bottom, I also need to do it to the top. So 2 times 6. And then I'm going to do my maths to work those out. 2 times 6 is 12. And 5 times 6 is 30. So I've now got two fractions that have the same denominator. And I've made myself a nice red question. 25 over 30, take away 12 over 30. 25 take away 12 is 13. So 13 over 30. So just to recap what I did, and I've got some more examples to show you on this. I multiplied the first fraction by the second denominator, 5. And then I multiplied the second fraction by the first denominator. And that was so that I ended up with 30 on the bottom of both fractions. And when I had 30 on the bottom of both fractions, I can subtract them. Let's have a look at another example. So this one's an addition, but again, I've got two fractions with denominators that I can't easily combine. So I've got 2/3 add 5/7. So I'm going to look at my first fraction and I'm going to times both of these by the second denominator. So I'm going to times them both by 7. So 3 times 7 and 2 times 7, because whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 2 times 7 is 14. 3 times 7 is 21. Then I'm going to look at my second fraction, 5 over 7, and I'm going to times it by my first denominator. So I'm going to do 7 times 3 and 5 times 3. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. 5 times 3 is 15 and 7 times 3 is 21. This is an add question, and I've now made myself a nice, easy question with my denominator the same. So I've got 14 of them, add 15 of them. How many does that give me? It gives me 29 of them. 29 over 21. Those of you who are looking to push yourselves, extend your answers, you'll see that that is a top-heavy fraction or an improper fraction. And hopefully some of you will be able to convert that for me into 1 and 8 over 21. Don't worry if you can't do that bit. All I'm looking for is 29 over 21. If you can convert it, perfect. But leave it as 29 over 21 if you can't. I'm going to do a couple more of these because I know how difficult they are. And it's really important that we get them and we understand them. So, example number 3 is... Sorry. Example number 3, I've got the same example twice for some reason. Example number 3 is 9 over 5 take away 1 over 7. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm following the same method every single time. I look at the first fraction and I times the top and the bottom by the second denominator. So in this question it is 7. And I'm going to do 5 times 7 on the bottom. And whatever I do to the bottom, I also do to the top. So I'm going to do 9 times 7 on the top. 9 times 7 is 63. 5 times 7 is 35. Then I'm going to look at my second fraction and I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by the first denominator, which is 5. So I'm going to do 7 times 5, and then whatever I do to the bottom, I also do to the top. So 1 times 5. 1 times 5 is 5, and 7 times 5 is 35. I've now made myself a nice easy subtraction question because my denominators are the same. I have 63 of them and I subtract 5 of them. So how many do I have left? 63 take away 5 is 58. And I put that over that denominator 35. Don't do 35 take away 35 and tell me it's 0. That denominator must stay the same. That's why we did the work in the first place. That's why we put them over the same denominator. Again, those of you who are trying to push yourselves and see if you can get yourself some higher end marks here, you will notice that this is a top heavy fraction. And I can write that as 1, because 35 goes at, 58 goes into 35 once. And then I am left with, just checking I've got the right number here, my calculator, I'm left with 23, over 35. So 1 and 23 35ths. But again, I'm just looking for the red answer. I'm just looking for 58 over 35, nothing more. So a bit of a shorter lesson today because I want to see you putting some effort into these answers. So this is the end of the video. There's only one task for you to do today. It's split into 2 sections. The first section is the red section. This is really easy. It's fractions with the same denominator. I'm just checking your brains are working. You should be getting 10 out of 10 on that first section. Then there are 8 green questions for you to have a go at, just like those 3 examples I've done for you. I want you to have a go. Do it on paper. Do it on a whiteboard if you've got it. Do the working out first and then put your answer on the Google form. This will probably take you 20 to 30 minutes to do this task. So I want you to spend the time and getting it right. Any problems, pop me a question over on Google Classroom and I'll try and get back to you as quickly as I can. This is the end of the video. Good luck.